Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Intel with Greg Cosell, presented by Inside the Birds. I'm Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan from Inside the Birds. And with us again is the man, the tape breakdown czar, Greg Cosell. What's up, Greg?
What's happening, gentlemen? How we doing?
Good. We've decided with your advice that we are going to do part 2 of a pass catcher episode. Last week we went through a lot of wide receivers, most of them that we project will be first or second round picks. We did do a couple of sleepers, but it's such a deep group of wide receivers and pass catchers that we're going to throw in that second tier of wide receivers and that first tier of tight ends and go through it with you. Because as Greg, you suggested, and you're right about this, the lack of moves in free agency other than Zach Pascal for the Eagles has created a lot of buzz around what the Eagles are going to do at wide receiver in the draft. And Howie Roseman recently made some comments down at the owners' meetings where Adam was in Palm Beach about we're really looking forward to adding more in the draft. So here we go.
Well, he better talk to his head coach, who said that he loves his receiver core.
He does. But I think the head coach also said, "Hey, we're always looking to add and always looking to upgrade."
Okay. I did see Coach Sirianni say that he's very happy with his receivers.
Sure. So happy that they went out there looking for Allen Robinson and some other wide receiver. Who else? Calvin Ridley. Yeah. So happy that they were exploring the market.
It's good to be happy.
It is good to be happy. It is. So let's talk about a few wide receivers that we didn't get to in the last one. We did ask you about Danny Gray because we had him on our platform. Andrew DeCecco sat down. We did a nice StreamYard interview with him. A kid from SMU who is known for having a lot of speed. What did you see in Danny Gray?
Yeah, Danny Gray is first of all, he can run. He was a state champion in Texas in the 100-meter dash and the 4x100-meter relay. And Texas obviously puts out a lot of speed, so he can run. And his 40-yard dash time was 4.33. So we know that this kid can run. I think that he's that trait's always in demand. He can create explosive plays both on vertical routes and run after catch. And every team wants that. I would say at this point in time, he's not highly refined as a route runner, but he's more than just a track man playing receiver. He can attack all three levels of the defense. You can use him in the tunnel screen game on jet sweeps, obviously. I thought that his hands, which were very problematic early in the season in 2021, got better as the season progressed. So there's much to work with. He's probably not a guy who will give you a lot as a rookie if you draft him, other than perhaps using him on specific plays here and there because he can run and he can get on top of the defense.
So, Greg, there's a guy named Skyy Moore who John Hansen and I had on our show on a Sirius a week ago. He was a great interview. We really enjoyed talking to him. So give us an idea of what you thought of his tape.
Yeah, his tape was really intriguing. First of all, he's under 5'10", but he predominantly played outside at in college at
Eastern Michigan.
Michigan. I get all the Michigan. Well, he went to Western Michigan.
I think it was Western Michigan.
Western, yeah. It's funny. I was just watching the offensive tackle Raymond, who I think was Eastern, right? So I get confused with all the Michigans, and then there's Central as well. So
exactly.
But Moore went to Western. So he achieved really high level production, predominantly playing outside. He did play in the slot. Now, I think to me, he's essentially going to be a slot. Now, we know that the league has changed, guys, to the point where very few guys are just slot guys. There are some. There's actually one in this draft who I think fits that role. But I think most teams now think in terms of using receivers in different places, not just in one place. But I think Moore probably fits the bill as a predominant slot receiver. He's got a really compact frame because even though he's under 5'10", he's 195 pounds. He ran well. He's physical. He's competitively tough. And I think that's one reason he'll work well inside. He caught a ton of slants and glance routes in college, and his run after catch was really, really good. I think he can probably at times get on top of the defense. He did show a second gear at times in college with the ball in the air on some vertical routes. So he's an intriguing guy. I'm really curious to see where he gets drafted. It wouldn't surprise me if he's a little polarizing. Adam, you probably know this better. I would bet there are some teams that love him, and there are other teams that are probably uncertain as to exactly, what he is. And when I say what he is, if they see him as a slot, are you drafting that guy in the top 40 or top 50?
Right. He did tell us that teams are telling him they project him to play the slot. But as you said, and I watched a couple highlight reels on YouTube. You're right. It's funny. Like, he's built really strong. His play strength, you could see this.
Really good. Yeah.
He plays right through contact. And what I found interesting is he doesn't look fast, but you would see, because he would win with his hands and he'd beat press. He would run by these DBs. And it's funny you say, like, it'll be interesting to see how teams see him.
Yeah, because
I would agree with your assessment, slot, but maybe, Greg, explain this. When you watch college tape, and I know you have to project, do you sometimes think, okay, if he goes to the Rams, they'll move him around?
Right.
Do you look at it that way sometimes when you're not sure?
For sure. I mean, that's the way I think about it, because I'm not working for one team, Adam. So I try to think, how did these players get deployed in the NFL? So you obviously start with their traits, you start with their attributes, their characteristics, you see how they're deployed in college. That tells you something. There's a lot of good coaches in college football, by the way, and they use players a specific way for any number of reasons. It could be a function of that player. It could be a function of the rest of the players in that unit, that they have to use a player a certain way. As I said, he lined up quite a bit on the outside. 43 of his 95 catches came when he was aligned at number 1, meaning outside. Maybe they did not have another outside receiver they felt good about. So you never know. Obviously, if you work for a team, you find out all this information. I just sit and watch tape, so I don't know the specific answer to that. So therefore, I think he'll be seen differently by different teams and how they run their offense. You brought up the Rams. There's other teams that do a lot of formation versatility with receivers. But I think when you just look at his traits and his toughness and his ability to play through contact effectively, I think he probably best translates as a slot receiver.
Do you feel that he could, in the right system, make an impact as a rookie? Maybe more so compared to Danny Gray?
Yes, without question. I think Moore can play as a rookie. Gray, I'd be surprised if Gray could play meaningful snaps as a rookie, unless it's a specific kind of thing.
Gotcha. Another kid we want to ask you about, Jalen Tolbert, seemed to have a nice week down in Mobile, playing in the stadium where he went to college, University of South Alabama. I know the broadcast crew seemed to like how he conducted himself down there. What do you think of his tape?
Yeah, he's a long, naturally fluid wide receiver. He's got easy movement traits. He's got the size and stride length to be a vertical dimension. He's not a true burner, but he's long, and he looks long on tape. I would say he's much more of a speed cut receiver than a kind of sink your hips, change of direction receiver. He's kind of a strider. He needs room. I think he's more of a finesse receiver. That's the way his tape struck me. And I actually watched his 2020 tape and his 2021 tape. So I've seen a lot of him. I think he'll likely be seen as an outside receiver because he's got size, he's got length, he's got a little bit of a 3-level profile that's best maximized when he has free access off the line of scrimmage, because he's a build-up speed guy. He's got the build-up acceleration, and that translates to his ability to run some vertical routes. I would say he's got more long acceleration than short area separation quickness. He's got really good body control. I think, it's funny, when I watched him in 2020, I actually contacted Jim Nagy, who obviously lives in Mobile and runs the Senior Bowl. And I said to him last summer, I contacted him, texted him, I said, "Hey, Jim, Tolbert's going to play in the NFL." And he said, "Oh, for sure." So when I watched him last summer, I knew, because this kid has the look and feel of an NFL wide receiver.
Do you think he can play the X? Can he get off the press coverage if need be?
I think he probably can over time.
Mm-hmm.
I would say he's not a physical receiver at this point in time based on his tape.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be questions about his ability to both defeat press and work the middle of the field and make tough catches in traffic. So, my sense is right now he would need work at that. Can he over time? I guess that depends on how he does the work. But, he's 6'1" and a quarter and 195. So he's long, but under 200 pounds.
Gotcha.
Greg, talking to some receivers coaches, a bunch of them mentioned Khalil Shakir from Boise State. Yeah. How does he fit in at the next level?
Oh, I really liked his tape a lot. And he's another guy that I didn't really know much about at all when I put on his tape. So he's Boise State. He ran very well. He's about 6 feet. He's 196. Now, here's a guy, 70% of his receptions came out of the slot. And my sense is, and Adam, maybe you spoke to people, my sense is most evaluators and coaches will see him as a slot receiver as he transitions to the league with some versatility to line up outside, but predominantly a slot. And I made the point that his game, which is really fun to watch, is built on a strong profile of versatility, refined and detailed route running, separation quickness, outstanding body control and hands, run after catch, and he's super competitive. Competitive.
Wow.
I really, really like this kid. I think this kid can come right in and play right away and be a contributor in the passing game in 11 personnel groupings. I think you could line him up in the slot. You could move him. He just struck me as a guy with his competitiveness, his toughness. He's smooth and fluid. There's an easy feel to his movement. He never looked hurried in anything he did. I really liked his tape, and I think he can play right away.
Wow. All right. Khalil Shakir out of Boise State gets the Greg Cosell stamp of approval.
Yeah, I don't usually say that very often, guys. You know that.
Let's see if we can go 2 for 2 because we meant to ask you about this guy last time because I've heard some definitely good things, and I'm sure Adam too. Cincinnati's Alec Pierce.
Yeah, I really liked Alec Pierce's tape a lot.
Ooh, 2 for 2.
Yeah, really liked his tape. First of all, he's 6'3", he's 208. He ran really well at the combine. And, he's a guy that I think he can be a boundary X in the NFL. I think he can be a tough matchup in the slot, in the inside slot to trips. He plays big and long and fast with his stride length. And I've learned that over time. Stride length is a trait. He has great body control and hands. He made a ton of contested catches on vertical throws and in the red zone. And I thought he showed enough of a refined feel for separation, quickness, and burst at the top of his route stem. There was a powerful feel to his movement. He defeated press coverage. He quickly got up to speed, getting on top of corners. He was a vertical dimension at Cincinnati. It would not surprise me at all if he was able to do that in the NFL with that combination of stride length, body control, competitiveness, really good hands. Again, guys that big, you don't normally describe them as sudden or explosive, but he's an outstanding natural athlete. He's got great hand-eye coordination. And I got to tell you guys, this will be a bold, controversial statement, I guess, but I kind of liked him more than Drake London.
Wow, interesting. The stride length comment you just said. Stride length is a trait. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I had to learn that, Geoff. I was wrong years ago on a lot of guys because when guys get free access off the ball, taller receivers, they can get into their stride really quickly and they eat up ground. So even if they're not 4.35 guys, they eat up ground really quickly. The classic stride length receiver, and I'm not comparing Alex Pierce to him, we're just talking about stride length, was Randy Moss. They would put Randy Moss in motion very often, the Vikings. He'd motion from the outside toward the formation, what we very often called zin motion. And he would take 3 steps and it looked like he was 15 yards down the field. So stride length is a trait. You can eat up ground really quickly. So a guy that's 6'3" with long strides, even if he doesn't run, as I said, a 4.35, he might eat up the same distance quicker than a guy who's 5'11" and runs the 4.3 because he just eats up ground. So stride length is a trait. And I had to learn that. And the guy who taught me that, and I was wrong on him, was Jordy Nelson. And that goes back years. But I watched his tape and I thought, oh, this guy's not going to be a vertical receiver in the NFL because he's, and I was wrong. And then I sort of had to reassess how I did things with receivers, particularly with tall receivers. And it just finally hit me that stride length is a trait.
Interesting. Greg, a guy who did not run well at the combine, but a lot of our followers are asking us is David Bell from Purdue, who ran his official time as 4.65, which obviously is basically a tight end time. So what do you think of his tape?
That was his official time?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. The official time is 4.65, which it's almost hard to believe, but that's what it says.
Well, it's funny you say that because I said that he's not a great athlete for the position, and his athletic traits do not suggest that he's a matchup issue for the defense. That's what I said. He's very measured and methodical in his movement. He's not sudden or explosive. He's kind of a one-speed receiver. But yet he catches the football. He's one of those guys. He has an understanding of how to attack coverage, man coverage, and he has an understanding of how to settle in zone voids. So even though he doesn't run well, he knows how to use his vertical stem. He has really good footwork. He has head feints. He's a receiver. He's a refined receiver. So he's one of those guys. It's a great conversation to have. And there's no answer to this. Receivers, coaches could well disagree on this, Adam. And Geoff, as you well know, it's looking at his athletic attributes versus his refinement as a receiver. The classic case of that, and there's also a competitive toughness involved in those kinds of conversations, because the classic case of that is Anquan Boldin. And I was in the dome when Anquan Boldin ran a 4.72 at the combine, and people kind of went, oh my God, that guy's not going to play in the NFL. And obviously played in the NFL, and he did okay. So I'm not suggesting David Bell is Anquan Boldin, but it's just a discussion that you have to have in a draft room. Will there be some people, and there will be, as Adam knows, that will say 4.65, we're not even putting him on our board. And right, Adam, that's the way some people will be.
If you have a 4.65, that'll basically push you down the board like 2 or 3 rounds just from the time.
Yeah.
But the smart teams will tell you, let the tape tell the story. And that's the struggle that teams have, because if you look analytically at numbers, well, a guy runs in the 4.65, he's in this percentile, he cannot make it the next level. Then why even watch tape?
Right. Well, no, it's funny to say that, because here's what I said in my transition. I said Bell's game is much more about detail and nuance than it is about high-level athleticism or explosiveness. And you can see from his tape that the process of route running and receiving is important to him. And he has made himself into a technician and a natural receiver. He has the look of a professional receiver, the way in which he plays. He just doesn't have the athletic and physical. When I say physical, he's obviously big enough to play receiver. He's a big kid. But when I say physical, I mean the athletic traits. He does not have the athletic traits that you'd ideally like, but he knows how to play receiver. So that's why there's a discussion in draft rooms, because this kid is not going to be a dynamic game changer. If you're looking for a game changer, it's not David Bell.
Interesting. Greg, to put a bow on wide receivers here before we move into tight ends, between the 10 or so that we did last week and the 5 or more we done today, I feel like you seem to like this overall group. I mean, you study so much tape. I don't know if you compare one year to another, but it seems like there's some good value. Second, third round, perhaps, maybe even a little bit deeper with this group.
I think, Geoff, there's always value with receivers because the college game is built on spread offense and throwing the football. Sure. So there's always value in receivers. It's just what you like and what you're looking to add to your specific offense. So, different people will see different receivers differently. We just finished talking about David Bell. Okay. If you're on a team, and I can't think of every NFL team offhand right now, but if you're on a team that has 2 receivers who can really run, okay, David Bell might be your guy, because he fills a need for your specific team. If you're looking for speed, David Bell's not your guy. So it eventually comes down to teams, what their offense is, who their receivers are, how they want to deploy him. if you feel that your offense absolutely demands a slot receiver and that you just don't have one that you feel good about, you might love Khalil Shakir. You might look at Skyy Moore and say, that's the guy. If you're a team that has a great slot, if you're the Rams, okay, and Cooper Kupp's predominantly your slot, you're probably not looking for a slot receiver,
Right.
So ultimately, because receivers, as you guys know, that position is among the most drafted every single year. It's usually receivers and corners. You can always find receivers, and I would argue that in this given draft, there's not a Jamar Chase. So, a lot of these receivers will be a function of team, scheme, and I'm talking even at the top of the receiver list for most people. I think that it'll still be a function of team and scheme.
Gotcha. All right. So
just one thing on Bell, Greg. Could you see Bell playing the slot at the next level? Because we talk about his speed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because he's physical, he's big. You don't need to look again. There's all kinds of flavors of slot receivers too. There's the quick guys that everybody thinks slot quick, but you can put a big guy in the slot, and it's a different kind of slot receiver. But you can absolutely do that.
Gotcha. David Bell to the Miami Dolphins. You said put him with two guys who can run. So that just all of a sudden triggered my head. Well, hey, Miami Dolphins got some guys who can run now. With Hill and Waddle. So
they sure do.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So let's move on from wide receivers and talk about tight ends. Now, obviously, this is a different type. There's not going to be 50 that we're going to throw at you. And there's usually maybe 5 or 6 that really jump off the charts each year. So I'll just ask you, Greg, the guys tape that you enjoyed most among all tight ends that you watched this year is who?
2 guys would come to my mind.
Go for
Trey
it.
McBride and Charlie Kolar.
Okay.
I mean, if I'm talking about guys that I think, can pretty much step right in and play and have meaningful roles, not just be used here and there. I think McBride probably would be the most complete tight end prospect. He's competitive. He can run block as an attached blocker. And while he's not explosive the way we think of, let's say, Travis Kelce, and in fact, I looked up Travis Kelce's pre-draft measurables to compare them to McBride, and Kelce's were better in pretty much all areas. But McBride lined up at the boundary X in college and won one-on-one. I think he'll be able to do that in the NFL. I think he has the traits to be a tight end 1. He'll probably begin his career as a strong tight end 2. If he's drafted by a team that plays a lot of 12 personnel, he'll probably get meaningful snaps. But I think that he really is a complete tight end prospect. He's a plus athlete, not a great athlete, and that's why no one's talking about him, let's say as a top 40 selection, because he's not a great athlete, but he's very smooth with his route running, and he's got outstanding hands, and the play speed is good. He's not, like I said, he's not explosive, but he's got very good play speed.
And on Kolar,
Kolar is just one of those guys that was fun to watch because he catches everything. I mean, I did him last summer as well, and he's a guy that you enjoy watching. I mean, he doesn't necessarily possess the kind of movement and overall athleticism you would like to see, but his size and his length, he looks and plays even bigger than his measurables, and he's over 6'6". He's got outstanding hands. He struck me very interestingly when I finished watching him. I thought that he was somewhat like Zach Ertz. I mean, I didn't think that the comparison was a bad one. It would not surprise me at all if, depending on where Kolar is drafted, he develops into a volume receiver. He made tough catches at all areas of the field. He's got great hands. He's got an intuitive feel for creating space. He's very good at playing off contact. He's not necessarily a clean separator, but he understood how to use his body and his physicality and his hands to create just enough room. And he did that over and over and over again. And I really think he'll do that in the NFL.
Greg, how about Greg Dulcich? I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Dulcich?
I think it's Dulcich.
Dulcich. Greg Dulcich from
Yeah.
UCLA. Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to play in the league for sure because he's got some vertical ability, and that's always in demand. He's got speed. He's got stride length. He can run the vertical seams. He can run the intermediate and deeper crossers. You can line him up anywhere in the formation. He can stretch the field. That trait is always in demand, more so now than ever before. I mean, as Adam knows, that's all you heard at the combine. Explosive plays. He can do that. He also lined up at the boundary X at times. I believe he can do so at the next level, given that he's got that stride length and build-up speed to be a vertical dimension to challenge linebackers and safeties, perhaps even some corners. There's no doubt he'll play in the league. His snap count, his target volume will be a function of what team drafts him and how they see him. So here's a guy to me that played faster than his time 40.
Can he block? Is the next question.
That's not his deal.
Yeah. Gotcha.
They didn't really use him that way a whole lot. He's a receiver.
Trying to think of a good comp here. Eric Ebron?
He's not quite as explosive. When Ebron came out of college, I believe it was North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yes.
He could really run. Dulcich doesn't run like Ebron. I mean, I remember watching Ebron come out of college. I think he caught a 75-yard touchdown against the University of Miami when he came out of college, and he looked like a wide receiver. Dulcich doesn't quite look like a wide receiver. He's not quite Eric Ebron. You know, Ebron's obviously had some good years in the NFL, never quite became, I think, what a lot of people thought he could be, but he certainly had some good years. But when he came out of college, he could really run.
Yeah, no, that's why I was sort of making the comparison because he just he's not been an explosive tight end in his NFL career. He's been a red zone kind of guy, both with the Steelers and the Colts. So,
well, the thing about Dulcich too is, and look, there's a lot of people who focus on production. You guys know when they look at these guys, Dulcich would have had much better receiving numbers if the quarterback play at UCLA was better. Way too many poor ball placement throws on routine pitch and catch plays when Dulcich was wide open, and that hurt his numbers. So let's say he had 12 more catches, and some of those were big plays, by the way. Let's say he had 12 more catches and you know, much bigger yardage. Would people talk about him differently? Maybe they would. But this kid has vertical ability.
Another tight end from a big-time school is Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State, Greg. What do you think of him?
Yeah, Ruckert, you know, he was a big-time recruit coming out. I think he's from the Long Island area, if I'm not mistaken. But he was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. He was a 4-star. He was the number 2 tight end prospect nationally when he came out. You know, tight ends are not featured in Ohio State's offense, so they don't put up numbers. And I'm not sitting here saying he's George Kittle, but George Kittle, I think, caught 20 and 22 balls his last 2 years at Iowa. So, you know, no one thought of George Kittle, wow, who's this guy, until he went to the combine and had a ridiculous measurables performance at the combine. But Ruckert possesses the athletic and receiving traits for the position that could well make him a more productive NFL receiver than he was in college. He's not the level of athlete or mover as Kelsey or Waller, but he's a pretty efficient route runner. He's got plus route quickness. He's got a refined understanding of how to run routes. He's got subtle movements to create separation. It would not surprise me at all if down the road he becomes a tight end 1. Now, I think early in his career, I would think he'd be a lot like a Foster Moreau, Adam, and you know much about Foster Moreau.
Sure.
You know, keep in mind, Moreau is a 4th-round pick in the 2019 draft. He's had some good moments in the league. It wouldn't surprise me if Ruckert starts out like that, and you know, maybe he becomes a Dalton Schultz type player down the road. Look, Schultz this year, I think, caught 75-plus balls and had about 115 or 120 targets. You know, I could see Ruckert becoming that guy down the road.
Interesting. How about a Cade Otton out of Washington?
Did not see him. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Did we see Jelani Woods out of Virginia?
We did see Jelani Woods.
Okay.
And I think Jelani Woods is one of the most intriguing overall players in this entire draft, not just at the tight end position. He's over 6'7", okay? He ran well. His arm length and wingspan are ridiculous. So he's got rare size. His movement is good. He's got pretty good hands. He's got good body control. He's got run after catch. He's competitive. I think he's just scratching the surface of what he can become. He does not have a lot of experience as a receiver. He was a transfer from Oklahoma State, where he was hardly ever used as a receiver. So at Virginia, he became a tight end receiver basically for the first time in his college career. He was recruited out of high school in Georgia as a quarterback. He won a state championship in Georgia as a quarterback. So you're dealing with a guy that's a plus athlete with outstanding size and stride length, with build-up speed to be a factor on vertical routes and crossing routes. And he's kind of learning the position as he's playing it. So, again, is he ready to go week one? That's impossible to answer. But this kid's going to be a good player, assuming there's no red flags. This kid was a fascinating guy for me to watch. Again, another guy I didn't know anything about until I put the tape on.
Wow. Well, look, this tight end group, Greg, overall, I don't know if as you've gone through this so far, it doesn't sound like there's like this super high level guy's going to go in the first round. However, as you get through the list, do you think it's a deep class?
I do. And I think the guy that was probably most frustrating for me was Jalen Weidemeyer from Texas A&M, because I watched his tape last summer and I came away thinking, God, if this guy has a really good 2021, you're dealing with a really good prospect, because I thought his 2020 tape was really good. And his 2021 tape, and again, I can't tell you why, it was not as strong in almost every area. And he became a really challenging evaluation because he was a big-time recruit. When A&M got him, it was considered a coup. He became a really challenging evaluation, given that his 2020 tape and 2021 tape were so markedly different, especially when it came to his movement traits and his run blocking. But there were just enough flashes in 2021 to make you think that there's something to work with. But I'm telling you, it was so surprising to me, because that rarely happens, that there's such a marked difference between a player from one year to the next.
As someone who only watches tape and does not look into backgrounds and things, when you see tape of someone who shows that they can play at a high level,
right,
but then it goes away the next year, or it's inconsistent like you're describing, does that just put your alarm up to say maybe there's something going, like the kid clearly has the talent, maybe there's just something I don't know about?
Yeah.
Or have you seen a case where a guy just regresses physically and you just don't think he is the player that he was maybe the year before?
Maybe scouts and evaluators would answer it differently than I will, but I don't think guys regress physically unless there's an injury. I think it's just the execution of those physical traits. I don't think Jalen Weidemeyer from 2020 to 2021 all of a sudden can't run anymore. Right. I mean, he's the same guy physically and athletically. He just, it doesn't show up for whatever reason. And because I don't work for a team, and I'm not going to sit down with him, and I'm not going to talk to, his high school coach and his high school janitor and his college coach and the strength guy and the conditioning guy, which is what teams do, by the way, as you guys know. I just have to look at the tape and say, there's something not right here. And I think if you talk to, I had a great conversation with a college coach yesterday, by the way, talking about the whole concept of traits versus production versus coaching. And it's not a mathematical equation. You're not saying 2 and 2 is 4 here. So for guys, there's always some guys who it's obvious, hey, the traits are there, the production's there. You find out they're great kids and no issue with coaching them. Then there's guys whose traits are high level, production's not there, and then you try to figure out why that's the case. And there's very often there's not an easy answer. There's a lot of really good coaches in college football. If you're getting a kid from a Power 5 school like Texas A&M, where Weidemeyer went, he's being coached. There's not bad coaches at Texas A&M. If you get a kid from Ohio State or Alabama or any of these schools, they're being coached. So it's a very difficult thing to try to find out why a player that clearly has physical and athletic traits and that has shown it it's there on tape somewhere. Why it doesn't come out more often?
Sure,
So,
sure, and that we saw, up close and personally 2 years ago with Travis Fulgham with the Eagles, a guy who clearly had, some talent and showed it for a burst there,
for 4 or 5 weeks. Look,
Yeah.
I mean, it's there on tape. No one was suggesting he's Jerry Rice, but for 4 or 5 weeks, we came away saying that this guy looks like an NFL wide receiver. He's big, he can run, he caught the ball, and we knew there were many other issues, which, Adam knew about. I didn't know all those details, and I learned them, obviously. But, when you see that on film, you wonder, okay, why doesn't this happen more often?
Right. Great stuff. Adam, did you have one more, or you were good?
Yeah, actually, I want to do one small school kid. I'm not sure if you've seen him, but his name's brought up a lot to me. Is Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina?
I did see Isaiah.
You did? Okay.
Yes, and I likely. Yeah. I think he's a really interesting player. I mean, he lined up all over. It's funny. He was 6'4.5" at the combine, and he didn't look it on tape. He looks smaller. He's kind of a compact build guy, but he's 6'4.5". He's got a kind of a compact, low-cut build that allows him to make quick, decisive cuts. He's got no wasted motion. He's got really good balance and body control. He's got really strong hands. He was used as a vertical receiver. He lined up at boundary X in their system. He ran vertical routes, in breakers. I think he'll be able to do that at the NFL. I liked his tape a lot. I think he's a really intriguing prospect. I know he's obviously not a Power 5 guy, but I thought he was kind of a fun guy to watch. And again, I'm no good with where guys get drafted, but he's going to play in the NFL.
That Coastal Carolina factory, we just had Jeffrey Gunter, who's an edge for them, on our platform doing a show with Andrew DeCecco.
He was at the combine.
Yep. That was on that's on our Inside the Birds platform.
And obviously
as well.
Jackson on the Eagles went there.
Teron Jackson, right.
Teron Jackson. Right. So no, they put together a nice little program there.
Absolutely. All right, and we're putting together a pretty good, nice little program here with you, Greg Cosell, as we break down these NFL draft prospects. We have now done a lot of wide receivers. We've thrown tight ends in there, and next week we'll get a new position group for Greg to break down and profile for us. So have a great week, everyone. For Adam Caplan and Greg Cosell, I'm Geoff Mosher, and you've been watching The Intel with Greg Cosell.